For 3,000 years, the Galactic Dominion had ruled with absolute authority across 47 star systems. Their massive dreadnoughts patrolled the void between worlds, enforcing the iron law that kept billions in subjugation. No species had ever successfully challenged their might. No rebellion had lasted more than a few months before being crushed beneath their overwhelming firepower, until today. Deep in this Aryan system, where the Dominion's most brutal prison colonies extracted rare minerals from dead moons, something impossible appeared on every sensor screen across the sector. A single ship, sleek and unfamiliar, bearing the markings of a species that wasn't even supposed to exist anymore. The humans had been declared extinct over 2 centuries ago, their homeworld nothing but radioactive ash according to official records. Yet here was their vessel broadcasting a simple message that would echo through history: surrender now or face the consequences of your crimes. What followed next would shatter everything the galaxy thought it knew about power, mercy, and the indomitable spirit of humanity. Admiral Vexstar of the Dominion Third Fleet stood rigid before the massive viewing screen of his command ship, the Eternal Dominance. The bridge hummed with the usual efficiency of a Calvarian crew, their forearms working multiple control stations simultaneously while their compound eyes tracked dozens of data streams. For 18 cycles, Vexstar had commanded this sector without incident. The prison colonies on Zirion 7 and its 3 moons operated smoothly, extracting the precious quantum crystals that powered the Dominion's war machine. "Admiral, we're detecting an unscheduled hyperspace exit," reported Navigation Officer Zelkoff, her voice carrying the characteristic clicking undertones of her species. "Single vessel, unknown configuration." Unscheduled arrivals meant paperwork, investigations, and possible delays in the mining quotas. "Pirates? Negative. Sir, the energy signature is unlike anything in our databases. The vessel appears to be broadcasting a general communication frequency. Size and armament?" Zelkoff's compound eyes dimmed slightly, a sign of confusion among her people. "Sir, the readings are inconsistent. The ship measures approximately 800 meters in length, but our deep scans are being deflected by some form of adaptive shielding. We cannot determine weapon configurations. 800 meters. Vexstar relaxed slightly. A respectable size for a merchant vessel or light cruiser, but insignificant compared to the Eternal Dominance and its 3-kilometer bulk. His ship alone carried enough firepower to level a small moon, and he had 12 escort destroyers in formation around him. "Put the transmission through," he commanded. The main screen flickered, replacing the star field with the image of a creature that made Vexstar's breathing apparatus stutter. The being was bipedal, with pale skin and strange single-lens eyes that seemed to burn with an inner fire. Hair, an evolutionary oddity, covered the top of its head in a dark brown mass, but most disturbing was its mouth. When it spoke, Vexstar could see rows of what appeared to be grinding teeth, marking it as some form of predator. "This is Captain Elena Rodriguez of the UES Retribution, representing the United Earth Systems," the creature said, its voice carrying a strange musical quality despite the underlying steel. "I am addressing the commanding officer of Dominion forces in this system." Vexstar activated his translation matrix, though the creature seemed to be speaking in perfect galactic standard. "I am Admiral Vexstar, Supreme Commander of this sector. You are in violation of Dominion space. State your business or prepare to be destroyed." The human's lips curved in what Vexstar's cultural database identified as a smile. Though among humans he learned with growing unease, such expressions could indicate anything from pleasure to imminent violence. "We've been watching your operations in this system with great interest." "Impossible," Vexstar snarled, his voice translator adding a menacing harmonic. "The species known as humans was exterminated 200 cycles ago. The planet Earth is a dead world, consumed by nuclear fire. Reports of our extinction have been greatly exaggerated," Rodriguez replied, that unsettling smile never wavering. "We've spent the last 2 centuries rebuilding, learning, and preparing for this moment. We've come to discuss the immediate cessation of your mining operations and the liberation of all enslaved populations in this system." A wave of clicking laughter rippled across the bridge. Even Vexstar found his mandibles twitching with amusement. You wish to negotiate with a single ship against an entire fleet? Either your species has developed severe mental deficiencies, or this is an elaborate form of suicide. Oh, Admiral, Rodriguez said, and now her smile showed those predator teeth clearly. Who said anything about a single ship? The tactical display behind Vexstar erupted into chaos. Zelkoth's voice rose to an alarmed whistle. Sir, multiple hyperspace signatures. Vessels are dropping out of FTL in formation around us. How many? Vexstar demanded, whirling to face the tactical screen. 47 ships, sir. No, wait, 63. Admiral, they're still coming through. The viewing screen split to show the space around the eternal dominance. Ship after ship materialized from the twisted dimensions of hyperspace, each one sleek and predatory-looking like their flagship. They moved with a precision that spoke of advanced artificial intelligence and combat experience, forming a perfect sphere around the Dominion fleet. Final count, Admiral, Zelkoth reported, her voice barely above a whisper. 128 vessels, all matching the configuration of the human flagship. Vexstar's breathing became labored. His fleet, while formidable, consisted of only 15 ships. The humans had appeared with over 8 times that number, and their sudden arrival spoke of tactical capabilities far beyond Dominion technology. Impressive, isn't it? Rodriguez continued conversationally. Each of these ships represents the combined technological advancement of 2 centuries of human determination. We learned a great deal from the ashes of our homeworld, Admiral. We learned about survival, about adaptation, and most importantly, about justice. What do you want? Vexstar found himself asking, his earlier arrogance evaporating like atmosphere from a hull breach. I told you already. Immediate cessation of all mining operations. Release of all enslaved workers. Surrender of this fleet and all personnel for trial under United Earth jurisdiction. You're insane. The Dominion controls 47 systems, our fleet's number in the thousands. You cannot possibly, Admiral, Rodriguez interrupted gently. Let me share something with you. 200 years ago, your predecessors made the mistake of attacking our homeworld with nuclear weapons. They believed they had wiped out our species entirely. What they actually did was teach us that the universe contains species willing to commit genocide for profit. We decided we couldn't allow that to continue. The tactical display updated again, and Vexstar felt his blood turn to ice water. Each human ship was powering weapons that registered energy levels beyond his instrument's ability to measure accurately. You see, Admiral, we didn't just rebuild our civilization. We rebuilt it with one specific purpose in mind, to ensure that no species would ever again suffer under the kind of tyranny you represent. We've spent 2 centuries preparing for this moment, developing technology specifically designed to counter Dominion advantages. Rodriguez leaned forward slightly, and her eyes seemed to bore into Vexstar's soul. Your shields, for instance. Quantum lattice barriers virtually impermeable to conventional weapons. We developed phase variance plasma that exists in 11 dimensions simultaneously. Your armor plating enhanced uranium mesh that can withstand direct nuclear bombardment. We created nanodissemblers that can reduce uranium to its component atoms in seconds. This is impossible, Vexstar whispered. No single species could develop such advantages. The Dominion has the resources of 47 worlds, the greatest scientists of dozens of species. And we had something you never understood, Rodriguez said softly, motivation. When someone destroys your world, murders your families, and scatters your people across the void, it teaches you things about determination that comfortable tyrants can never comprehend. Warning sirens began blaring across the bridge. Zelkoth's voice cracked with panic. Admiral, the human ships are charging some form of exotic weapons system. Energy readings are off the scale. You have 30 seconds to respond to our terms, Rodriguez announced. Surrender now, and your crews will be treated according to the laws of war. Continue to resist, and we will demonstrate exactly what 200 years of human engineering can accomplish." Vexstar looked around his bridge, seeing his own fear reflected in the compound eyes and sensor arrays of his crew. The Eternal Dominance had been the pride of the Third Fleet, representing the absolute pinnacle of Dominion military technology. Now, surrounded by vessels that had appeared like ghosts from hyperspace, it felt as fragile as an egg. "Sir," his weapons officer called out, "our targeting systems can't get a lock on their ships. Some form of interference is scrambling our sensors." 15 seconds, Admiral," Rodriguez continued. "I should mention that we're broadcasting this conversation to every inhabited world in the system. The people you've enslaved are watching their liberators at work. History will remember what happens next." Through the viewing ports, Vexstar could see the mining platforms on Zarian 7's largest moon. Millions of beings from dozens of species labored there under Dominion oversight, extracting the quantum crystals that powered the Empire's expansion. For the first time in his career, he found himself thinking about them not as resources, but as individuals with hopes and dreams and families. "Time's up, Admiral." What followed defied everything Vexstar thought he knew about space combat. Instead of the familiar lance beams of plasma or the devastating explosions of quantum torpedoes, the human weapons produced something entirely different. Streams of what appeared to be liquid light reached out from each ship, moving at velocities that shouldn't have been possible and bending through space in ways that violated basic physics. The beams struck the Eternal Dominance and its escort destroyers simultaneously. Vexstar braced for the impact, expecting the bridge to erupt in flames and his crew to be vaporized instantly. Instead, something far more terrifying happened. Nothing. The beams passed through their shields as if they didn't exist, struck their hull plating without causing any apparent damage, and then simply stopped. For a moment, everything was quiet except for the panicked clicking of his crew. Then the lights went out. "Admiral," Zelkov called from the darkness, "all primary systems are offline. Power core is showing zero output. Life support is running on emergency batteries." Emergency lighting flickered on, bathing the bridge in an eerie red glow. Vexstar tried to access his command console, but every screen showed the same message in perfect Galactic standard: SY stem offline. Unauthorized accesses denied. Captain Rodriguez's voice filled the bridge, now coming from their own communication system. "Congratulations, Admiral. You've just experienced a non-lethal demonstration of human technological superiority. Your ships are now completely under our control. Engines, weapons, life support, even your food replicators. Everything operates at our discretion." Vexstar slumped into his command chair, the full weight of the situation crushing down on him. "How?" "Quantum-entangled nanoviruses," Rodriguez explained cheerfully. "They infiltrated every circuit in your fleet the moment our weapons fired. Your ships now respond only to commands from our computers. Your crews are alive and unharmed, but your vessels are effectively ours." The implications hit him like a meteor impact. If humans could disable entire fleets without firing a shot, if they could appear from hyperspace in overwhelming numbers, if they possessed technology that made Dominion defenses irrelevant, "This isn't possible," he said again. But even as he spoke the words, he knew he was watching the impossible happen around him. "Admiral, we're going to transport humanitarian teams aboard your ships to ensure your crew's safety while we sort this situation out. I recommend you instruct them to cooperate fully. Any attempt at resistance will result in the immediate shutdown of your life support systems." Through the viewing screen, Vexstar could see small craft launching from the human ships, each one moving with the same predatory grace as their parent vessels. In the distance, the mining platforms had gone dark as well. Their operations ceased for the first time in over a century. "Why?" he asked finally. "Why not simply destroy us? You clearly have the capability." Rodriguez's expression became serious for the first time since the conversation began. "Because despite what your species has done, we still believe that every sentient being deserves the chance to choose a better path. Your crews are following orders, just as our crews follow ours. The difference is that our orders come from elected representatives who answer to the people, while yours come from an empire built on suffering. The Dominion will not stand for this. Our fleets will come. Our armies will—" "Admiral," Rodriguez interrupted. And now her smile returned, but it carried no warmth at all. Do you really think we came here without a plan for that? But instead of showing the local system, it displayed a star map of the entire Dominion. 47 systems, each marked with the familiar symbols of Dominion control. As Vextar watched in growing horror, those symbols began changing, one by one, to new markers he didn't recognize. Every Dominion fleet, Admiral, every command center, every administrative hub. At this exact moment, they're all experiencing the same situation you are. 200 years of planning doesn't just produce better weapons, it produces better intelligence, better coordination, and better timing. The star map now showed the entire Dominion territory marked with human symbols. In a matter of minutes, an empire that had ruled for 3 millennia had been conquered without the loss of a single life. This is the end of the Galactic Dominion, Rodriguez announced, her words carrying across every communication channel in the system. This is the beginning of something better. For too long, the strong have preyed upon the weak, convincing themselves that might makes right. Today, we prove that justice, patience, and determination are stronger than any weapon. Vextar found his voice one last time. What happens now? Now, Admiral, we begin the long work of building a galaxy where species cooperate instead of dominating each other, where technology serves all people, not just the powerful, where the strong protect the weak instead of exploiting them. Rodriguez's expression softened slightly. Your crews will be given the choice to join this new order or return to whatever worlds they choose. Your leaders will face trial for their crimes, but with full legal representation and due process.
And me? That depends on you, Admiral.
Your record shows you've been an efficient administrator of this sector, but it also shows you've overseen the enslavement of millions. The courts will decide your fate, but they'll also consider your cooperation in the transition period. She leaned forward again. I suggest you use this time to think carefully about the choices that brought you to this moment. The communication ended, leaving Vextar alone with his thoughts in the red-lit bridge of his powerless flagship. Around him, his crew worked frantically to restore their systems, but he knew it was pointless. The humans had demonstrated capabilities that rendered everything he understood about warfare obsolete. Outside the viewing ports, human vessels moved through space with purpose and precision, already beginning the complex task of dismantling an empire. On the mining platforms below, he could see the bright lights of human shuttlecraft as liberation teams worked to free the enslaved populations. For the first time in his military career, Admiral Vextar found himself wondering if he had been fighting on the wrong side all along. The thought terrified him more than any weapon the humans could have pointed at his head. Dr. Sarah Chen stepped off the transport shuttle onto the mining platform of Zirian 7, her boots making contact with metal grating that hadn't been properly maintained in decades. The artificial gravity felt wrong. Too heavy, deliberately set to make movement difficult for the workers. Around her, the massive industrial complex stretched out like a metallic cancer across the moon's surface, its towers and processing plants belching toxic fumes into the thin, artificially maintained atmosphere. But what struck her most wasn't the industrial horror of the place. It was the silence. For over a century, this platform had operated around the clock, the sound of mining equipment and processing machinery creating a constant roar that could be heard from orbit. Now, with the Dominion control systems offline, everything had ground to a halt. In that silence, she could hear something else. Voices. Thousands of them, rising from the worker barracks in a cacophony of different languages, different species, all expressing the same emotion. Hope. Dr. Chen called Lieutenant Marcus Webb her military liaison for the liberation operation. The platform supervisors are requesting immediate audience. They're claiming the workers will riot without proper oversight. Sarah adjusted her translator and checked the medical supplies in her kit. As head of the Humanitarian Relief Division, she'd overseen the liberation of 17 worlds during humanity's systematic dismantling of various oppressive regimes across the galaxy. But each one still presented unique challenges. Tell the supervisors they'll get their audience, she replied. Right after we've established proper medical treatment for everyone who needs it and figured out how many species we're dealing with here. She looked up at the massive central tower where the Dominion administrators had lived in comfort while overseeing the suffering below. The building's lights were out now, its automated defense systems disabled along with everything else. According to her intelligence briefings, over 2 million beings from 37 different species were enslaved on this platform alone. Her communicator chirped, "Chen, this is Captain Rodriguez aboard the Retribution. Status report?"
"Initial assessment ongoing," Sarah replied, walking toward the nearest worker barracks.
"The platform is secure, but we're looking at a complex situation. Some of these beings have been here for generations. Many won't even remember their homeworlds. Take whatever time you need, Doctor. We've got this end covered." Through the platform's transparent aluminum dome, Sarah could see the UES fleet maintaining its position around the disabled Dominion ships. The sight still felt surreal, even after 2 years of active operations. 2 centuries of preparation had led to this moment, but sometimes it was hard to believe they were actually pulling it off. The barracks doors were massive, designed to accommodate the various species held here. As they slid open, Sarah was hit by a wall of mixed odors, too many bodies in too small a space, inadequate sanitation, the metallic tang of processed air, but underneath it all she detected something else, the pheromonal signatures of fear giving way to tentative hope. The first being she encountered was a Zephyrian, its crystalline carapace dulled by years of hard labor and poor nutrition. When it saw her uniform, the blue and silver of the UES Humanitarian Division, its optical clusters widened in confusion. "I am Dr. Sarah Chen," she said, activating her universal translator. "I'm here to help you. You're safe now. The Dominion control of this facility has ended." The Zephyrian's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation in its species. Then when it spoke, its voice was barely a whisper. "Trick always tricks. Work harder, they say. Sleep less, they say. Now new tricks. Down to bring herself to the being's eye level. No tricks, look outside. Do you see the ships? Those are human vessels. We've liberated this facility. No more forced labor, no more dominion." Other beings began to gather around them. Altarians with their fur matted and dull, Centaurians missing arms that should have regenerated years ago, dozens of species she recognized and several she didn't. All of them bore the signs of prolonged abuse, malnutrition, untreated injuries, the psychological damage that came from years of hopelessness. "Humans extinct," wheezed an elderly Altararian, its voice barely audible through damaged vocal cords. "Dominion say so. Nuclear fire. All dead.com. "We're very much alive," Sarah replied gently, "and we've come to take you home." A younger being, she couldn't immediately identify the species, pushed forward from the crowd. Its translator rendered its words in perfect standard. "Home. What home? Born here. Parents born here. Grandparents born here. This is home." The statement hit Sarah like a physical blow. She'd encountered this before, but it never got easier. Entire generations born into slavery, with no concept of freedom, no knowledge of their species' homeworlds or cultures. The rehabilitation process would take years, possibly decades. "Then we'll help you build a better home here," she said finally. "One where you work because you choose to, where you're paid for your labor, where you can leave if you want to." Lieutenant Webb approached with his tablet. "Doctor, we've made contact with the administrative staff. The platform supervisor is a Calvarian named Gektor. He's demanding to speak with the ranking human officer. I'll handle that shortly. First priority is medical assessment." "How many medical bays does this platform have?" 3, all in the administrative section. The workers have been using basic first aid stations. Sarah felt her jaw clench. 3 medical facilities for 2 million beings. Set up triage stations in the main gathering areas. Get the medical teams down here immediately and tell them to bring everything. Malnutrition, treatment, trauma counselors, species-specific medications, the works. As Webb coordinated with the orbital medical teams, Sarah continued her walk through the barracks. Each section was worse than the last. Beings crammed into spaces too small for their physiologies, inadequate food distribution systems, work schedules that violated every principle of sentient rights. In the Centaurian section, she found something that made her stop entirely, a small alcove where someone had carved words into the metal wall in the flowing script of the Centaurian language. Her translator struggled with the archaic dialect, but eventually rendered it, "Remember the blue skies. Remember the singing trees. Remember that once we were free." Beautiful, isn't it? Sarah turned to find a Centaurian approaching, its movements careful and deliberate. This being was old, ancient by Centaurian standards, with silver markings that indicated high rank in its species' traditional hierarchy. "You wrote this?" "My great-grandmother did. She was brought here in the early years of the platform's operation. She would tell stories of our home world to anyone who would listen, even as the Dominion tried to beat such thoughts out of us." "What's your name?"
The Dominion calls me Worker 7743.
"Gamma. My true name is Veltar Altheon, third singer of the Western Winds." "Veltar," Sarah said, the name feeling heavy with dignity on her tongue. "Would you like to see your homeworld again?" The ancient Centaurian was quiet for so long that Sarah wondered if he hadn't heard her. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of a century's worth of suppressed hope. "Is it still beautiful? The blue skies, the singing trees?" "According to our surveys, Centauria Prime is largely unchanged. Your people have maintained the forests and the wind gardens. They never stopped hoping their lost children would come home." Beltar's arm tendrils began to tremble, the Centaurian equivalent of tears. "I have great-great-grandchildren who have never seen a natural sky, never heard the wind song of our forests." "We'll make sure of it." Her communicator chirped again. "Doctor, this is Medical Team Alpha. We're seeing severe malnutrition across all species, plus signs of systematic medical neglect. We're going to need to set up a full-field hospital." "Approved. Use whatever resources you need." As the medical teams began arriving and setting up their equipment, Sarah made her way toward the administrative tower. It was time to deal with the Dominion staff. The elevator systems were offline, so she climbed the emergency stairs, her breathing becoming labored in the platform's heavy atmosphere. Supervisor Gektor waited in what had been his office, a luxurious space with artificial windows showing pleasant scenes from various worlds. He was a large Kelvarian, his forearms crossed in a gesture of barely contained fury. "This is an illegal seizure of Dominion property," he began before Sarah had even entered the room. "I demand to speak with your commanding officer immediately. These workers are legally bonded labor. You have no authority to interfere with lawful Dominion operations." Sarah took a seat across from his desk, noting the contrast between his comfortable surroundings and the worker barracks below. "Supervisor Gektor, I'm Dr. Sarah Chen, and I have full authority under United Earth Systems military law to liberate this facility. The Dominion's control of this system has ended. Time possible. The Third Fleet would never surrender to a single human vessel. It surrendered to 128 vessels, and that was just our local task force. At this moment, every Dominion installation in 47 systems is experiencing the same situation." Gektor's compound eyes widened. "You're lying." "Computer, display current status of Dominion military assets." A holographic display materialized above his desk showing the same star map Admiral Vexstar had seen hours earlier. Every Dominion symbol had been replaced with the blue and silver emblem of the United Earth Systems. Gektor stared at the display in silence for several minutes. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. 200 years of planning? 212 years, actually. We started planning the moment your predecessors glassed our homeworld. But the logistics alone, the coordination required. How could you possibly coordinate simultaneous operations across that much space? Sarah leaned back in her chair. When someone murders 9 billion of your people, you learn to be very patient and very thorough in your response. We had 2 centuries to study your empire, to identify every weakness, to develop counter-technologies for every advantage you possessed. And now what? You'll execute us all for following orders? No, You'll face trial for your actions, but under a legal system that guarantees due process and competent representation, unlike the system you've been enforcing here. She stood and walked to the artificial window, looking down at the barracks where human medical teams were now working alongside liberated beings to provide care that had been denied for generations. Supervisor, how many workers have died under your administration? That's not... We maintained acceptable mortality rates according to Dominion standards. How many? Gektor's mandibles clicked nervously. Approximately 470,000 over my 15-year tenure. 470,000 sentient beings died because they couldn't keep up with work quotas or because medical treatment was deemed too expensive. Undesirables. Sarah turned back to face him. I just met a Centaurian elder whose only crime was being born on a world the Dominion wanted to exploit. I've seen children in those barracks who have never committed any crime except being born to the wrong species. Tell me, Supervisor, what crime did Worker 7743 Gamma commit that justified a lifetime of slavery? Gektor had no answer. Here's what's going to happen, Sarah continued. You and your administrative staff will cooperate fully with our transition teams. You'll provide complete records of all workers, their species of origin, their families, everything. In return, you'll be treated according to the laws of war and given fair trials. And if I refuse, then you'll be confined to quarters while we figure everything out ourselves. Your cooperation or lack thereof will be noted during your trial, her communicator chirped. Dr. Chow asked, Chen, this is Team Leader Rodriguez. We've made contact with worker representatives from 12 different species. They're requesting a General Assembly to discuss the transition. Approved. Set it up in the main gathering area. And Rodriguez, make sure they understand this is their meeting. We're here to help, not to make decisions for them. As Sarah left the administrative tower, she reflected on the complexity of the task ahead. Liberating these people was only the beginning. Many had no homes to return to, having been enslaved for generations. Others came from worlds that had been strip-mined to barren rock. Some species had been so scattered by the Dominion that rebuilding their societies would take decades. But as she reached the main gathering area and saw thousands of beings coming together for the first time as free individuals rather than work units, she felt the same surge of pride that had sustained humanity through 2 centuries of preparation. The main area buzzed with activity in dozens of languages. Medical teams moved through the crowd, treating injuries and malnutrition, while cultural specialists worked to identify species and determine their needs. Translator networks hummed with constant activity as beings who had been forbidden to speak their native languages finally had the chance to do so again. A young human engineer approached her. Dr. Fisi, Chen, we've been analyzing the platform's systems. The Dominion's been deliberately creating inefficient workflows to justify the massive labor force. With proper automation, this facility could operate with maybe 10% of the current population while actually increasing output. Make those upgrades, Sarah replied, and start training anyone who wants to learn. These people deserve real jobs, not slave labor. As the day progressed, stories emerged that would haunt Sarah for years to come. Families separated across generations, children who had never seen their homeworlds, elders who remembered freedom but had given up hope of ever experiencing it again. Each story was a testament to both the cruelty of the old system and the resilience of the sentient spirit. But there were moments of hope, too. A Zephyrian engineer who had been designing improved mining equipment in secret for decades, dreaming of the day when beings would work for themselves instead of their oppressors. A group of Altairian teachers who had maintained their species' oral traditions despite the Dominion's attempts to erase them. Young beings of mixed species heritage who had formed their own underground support networks, caring for each other when no one else would. As the station's artificial sun set and the platform's lights created patterns across the moon's surface, Sarah stood on an observation deck watching the human fleet maintain its protective formation. In the distance, she could see other lights, liberation teams working on the other moons, processing ships arriving to help with the massive logistical challenge of relocating those who wanted to return home. Her communicator chirped one final time. Dr. Chen, this is Captain Rodriguez. Outstanding work today. How are you holding up? Tired but satisfied. We've got a long way to go, but we're making progress. The workers are organizing themselves into species groups and planning councils. Some want to go home. Others want to stay and help rebuild this place as a free colony. That's their choice to make now. Get some rest, Doctor. Tomorrow, we start the next phase. Sarah looked out at the stars, knowing that across 47 systems, similar scenes were playing out as humanity's long-planned liberation effort continued. 2 centuries of planning, and it was actually working. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when humanity decided to keep a promise made over the ashes of their homeworld. Never again would they allow tyranny to flourish while they had the power to stop it. The Dominion had fallen in a single day. Rebuilding what came next would take much longer, but for the first time in over 3,000 years, the galaxy had reason to hope for something better. 3 months after the fall of the Dominion, the Great Hall on New Geneva Station buzzed with activity that would have been impossible to imagine under the old regime. Representatives from 47 star systems sat together in carefully arranged seating that accommodated the physiological needs of dozens of different species. Calvarians with their 4 arms worked alongside bipedal humans. Crystalline Zephyrians reflected light patterns that helped Altarian delegates with their light-sensitive vision. The air itself was a carefully balanced mixture of gases that could support all the species present. Judge Advocate General Patricia Hawthorne stood at the central podium, her silver hair catching the station's artificial sunlight as she reviewed the documents before her. As the highest-ranking legal officer in the United Earth Systems, she had the unprecedented task of overseeing the trials of an entire galactic empire. Behind her, the symbol of the new Galactic Council hung prominently, a blue sphere surrounded by silver stars, representing unity rather than domination. "The tribunal will come to order," she announced, her voice carrying through the hall's sophisticated translation network. "We are here today to begin proceedings in the matter of the Galactic Dominion War Crimes Tribunal. The charges before us represent not just individual crimes, but systematic oppression spanning 3 millennia." In the defendant's section, former Admiral Vexstar sat with his appointed legal counsel, a human attorney named David Martinez, who had volunteered to represent Dominion officers despite the unpopularity of such work. Vexstar's compound eyes tracked the movement in the hall with the precision of a lifetime military officer, but his mandibles remained still, a sign of resignation among his people. "Admiral Vexstar," Judge Hawthorne continued, "you stand accused of crimes against sentience in your administration of the Zirian system. These charges include the enslavement of approximately 2 million beings, the systematic deprivation of medical care resulting in 470,000 deaths, and the use of forced labor in violation of fundamental sentient rights."
Attorney Martinez rose from his seat.
"Your Honor, my client pleads not guilty to all charges. Admiral Vexstar was acting under direct orders from Dominion High Command and within the legal framework of his society at the time." "The plea is noted," Hawthorne replied. "However, this tribunal operates under the principle that orders to commit crimes against sentience do not absolve individuals of responsibility for their actions." From the gallery, Captain Elena Rodriguez watched the proceedings with mixed emotions. As the military officer who had overseen Vexstar's capture, she felt a professional satisfaction in seeing justice beginning. But as someone who had spent 2 centuries preparing for this moment, she also understood the complexity of judging an entire civilization. The first witness called was Veltar Altheon, the elderly Centaurian who had spent most of his life as Worker 7743, Gamma. He moved slowly to the witness stand, his age and the effects of decades of hard labor evident in every step. But when he began to speak, his voice carried the dignity of his ancestral title as Third Singer of the Western Winds. "I was brought to the Zirian platform as a young adult," he testified. "My crime was being born on Centauria Prime when the Dominion decided our wind forests contained valuable minerals. My family tried to resist the forced relocation. They were executed as examples to others. The translator rendered his words with perfect clarity but could not convey the harmonics that made Centaurian speech so beautiful. Still, the emotional weight of his testimony filled the hall. For 87 years, I worked in the quantum crystal mines. 16 hours per day, 7 days per week, no holidays, no rest periods except when injury made work impossible. We were fed just enough to maintain our strength for labor. Medical treatment was provided only when our deaths would impact production quotas. Martinez rose to cross-examine. Mr. Altheon, did Admiral Vexstar personally oversee your treatment? The Admiral gave the orders. His subordinates carried them out. The result was the same. But you acknowledge that the Admiral was following a system that had been in place for centuries before his assignment to Zarian, but he could have chosen to be more humane within that system. Some Dominion officers found ways to reduce suffering while still meeting their quotas. Admiral Vexstar chose efficiency over mercy. Rodriguez leaned forward in her seat. This was the crux of the entire tribunal process. How do you judge individuals who are part of a systematic evil? How do you balance personal responsibility against institutional pressure? The next witness was Dr. Sarah Chen, who had led the liberation of the Zarian platform. She approached the stand with the confidence of someone who had spent months documenting the evidence of Dominion crimes. Dr. Chen, the prosecutor began, please describe the conditions you found on the Zarian platform. Systematic medical neglect, malnutrition, overcrowding, and psychological abuse designed to break the will of the enslaved population. In my 25 years of humanitarian work, I have never seen a more comprehensive system of dehumanization. She activated a holographic display that showed medical scans from the platform. Malnutrition rates exceeded 90%. Treatable diseases had been allowed to spread unchecked. Children showed signs of developmental delays caused by inadequate nutrition and environmental toxins. In your professional opinion, were these conditions the result of negligence or deliberate policy?
Deliberate policy. The Dominion had the resources and technology to provide adequate care.
They chose not to because suffering made the population easier to control. Martinez stood for his cross-examination. Dr. Chen, are you familiar with the resource constraints facing Dominion administrators? The pressure from high command to meet production quotas? I am. But those constraints don't explain why basic medical supplies were sold on the black market instead of being used to treat workers. They don't explain why children were forced into labor as young as 8 years old. They don't explain why workers who became too sick to be productive were simply left to die. Could it be that Admiral Vexstar was himself under threat? That failure to meet quotas could have resulted in his own execution. Dr. Chen considered the question carefully. Even if that were true, it doesn't justify the systematic torture of 2 million beings. Every military officer takes an oath to protect sentient life. That oath doesn't become void because following it might be personally dangerous. The testimony continued for weeks. Former slaves described lives of unimaginable hardship. Dominion officers attempted to explain the pressures and incentives that had shaped their actions. Expert witnesses provided context about the historical development of the Dominion's oppressive systems. But perhaps the most powerful moment came when Supervisor Gektor took the stand in his own defense. The Calvarian's forearms gestured expressively as he tried to explain his actions. I was trained from birth to see certain species as inherently inferior, he testified. The Dominion educational system taught us that humans were violent savages, that Centaurians were too weak for complex thought, that Zephyrians were essentially organic machines without true sentience. The prosecutor pointed out, did you never observe evidence that contradicted these teachings? Gektor's mandibles clicked nervously. I told myself that any signs of intelligence or creativity were aberrations. The system taught us to ignore such evidence, to see it as dangerous thinking that could undermine social stability.
When Worker 7733
Gamma composed poetry about his homeworld. Did you consider that evidence of sentience?
I ordered him to stop. Poetry was considered a form of resistance.
When Zephyrian Worker 4521 Beta designed a more efficient mining process that could have saved lives, what did you do? I implemented the design but gave credit to a Dominion engineer. Workers weren't supposed to be capable of innovation. And when Altairean children became sick because of environmental toxins, did you request additional medical supplies? Gektor was quiet for a long moment. No. I reported the illnesses as pre-existing conditions to avoid impact on our efficiency ratings. The admission hung in the air like a physical weight. Even his own attorney seemed stunned by the casual admission of allowing children to suffer for bureaucratic convenience. Judge Hawthorne called for a recess, and the hall buzzed with conversation in dozens of languages. Rodriguez noticed Admiral Vextar speaking quietly with his attorney, his expression unreadable. During the recess, Rodriguez found herself in conversation with Ambassador Tavara of the Altarian Coalition, one of the new governments that had formed in the wake of the Dominion's collapse. "Captain Rodriguez," Tavara said, her silver fur catching the station's light, "my people are grateful for their liberation, but many wonder what becomes of beings like Gektor after these trials." "That's up to the tribunal," Rodriguez replied. "But our justice system focuses on rehabilitation and restoration rather than revenge." Rodriguez looked through the hall's transparent aluminum walls at the stars beyond. "Revenge might feel satisfying, but it doesn't undo the harm that was done. Our goal is to create a system where such crimes become impossible, not to satisfy our anger." When court reconvened, Admiral Vextar requested permission to address the tribunal directly. Against his attorney's advice, he stood and spoke without notes. "I have listened to the testimony of my victims," he began, "and I can no longer pretend that I was merely following orders. I made choices every day for 18 years. I chose efficiency over mercy. I chose career advancement over the welfare of those under my authority. I chose to see beings as resources rather than individuals." His voice carried clearly through the hall's translation system. "I cannot undo the suffering I caused. I cannot bring back the dead. But I can acknowledge the truth of what I did and accept responsibility for it." Martinez tried to interrupt, but Vextar continued. "I plead guilty to all charges. I ask only that this tribunal consider the systematic nature of the evil I participated in, so that future societies might build better safeguards against such corruption." "Dad," the hall erupted in shocked whispers, "a Dominion admiral had just confessed to crimes against sentience without any plea bargain or promise of leniency." Judge Hawthorne called for order. "Admiral Vextar, you understand that this admission could result in life imprisonment?" "I understand. I also understand that my victims will carry the scars of my actions for the rest of their lives. If imprisonment is the price of acknowledging that truth, I accept it." The trial continued for several more weeks as other cases were heard. Some defendants maintained their innocence, others attempted to shift blame to their superiors, and a few followed Vextar's example by accepting full responsibility for their actions. When the verdicts were finally announced, they reflected the tribunal's commitment to proportional justice. Vextar received 25 years imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 15 years if he demonstrated genuine rehabilitation. Gektor received 30 years without parole. Lower-level officials received sentences ranging from community service to moderate prison terms, depending on their level of responsibility and their willingness to cooperate with rehabilitation programs. But the most significant outcome was the establishment of the Galactic Justice Protocol, a legal framework that would govern the new Confederation of Free Worlds. The protocol established fundamental rights for all sentient beings, created international courts to prevent future atrocities, and mandated educational systems designed to promote empathy and understanding between species. As Rodriguez prepared to return to Earth for her next assignment, she visited Vextar in the detention facility where he was beginning his sentence. The former admiral was working in the facility's library, helping to translate human legal texts into Kelvarian for use in educational programs. "Any regrets?" she asked him. Vextar looked up from his work. "Many, but not about my confession. For the first time in decades, I can sleep without nightmares." The rehabilitation programs seem to be working. They are. Learning to see my victims as individuals rather than statistics has been enlightening. Painful, but enlightening. Rodriguez nodded. Admiral, can I ask you something? In all your years commanding the Xerian system, did you ever question the Dominion's methods? Vextar was quiet for a moment. Yes, many times. But I told myself that questioning orders was the path to chaos, that my duty was to the stability of the system rather than to the individuals within it. And now I understand that a system built on the suffering of innocents has no stability worth preserving. Real stability comes from justice, from ensuring that all beings can live with dignity. As Rodriguez left the detention facility, she reflected on the broader implications of the trials. The Galactic Dominion had fallen, but rebuilding the galaxy would be a much longer process. Some worlds had been so damaged by centuries of exploitation that they might never fully recover. Some species had been scattered so widely that reunification seemed impossible. But for the first time in millennia, the galaxy had a legal framework based on the rights of individuals rather than the power of states. The trials had established precedents that would guide future generations in building a more just society. The real test would come not from defeating the Dominion, but from proving that the alternatives humanity offered were actually better. That task would require not just military might, but moral courage, practical wisdom, and the patience to build institutions that could outlast any single species or generation. As she boarded her transport back to Earth, Rodriguez allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. They had kept their promise to the dead of Earth. The galaxy would never again witness the unchecked tyranny of the Dominion. Whether they could build something better in its place remained to be seen. But for the first time in 3 millennia, the attempt was being made. The trials were over. The real work was just beginning. 2 years after the fall of the Dominion, engineer Maya Patel stood at the observation deck of the orbital construction platform above Xerion 7, watching the transformation below with a mixture of pride and exhaustion. Where once toxic mining operations had scarred the moon's surface, new cities were rising from the ground up. Designed collaboratively by freed beings working alongside human architects and engineers from across the former Dominion space. The contrast was stunning. The old Dominion installations had been purely functional. Massive, brutalist structures designed to maximize extraction and minimize cost. The new settlements growing across the moon's surface flowed organically with the landscape, incorporating the aesthetic preferences and practical needs of the dozens of species who had chosen to make this world their new home. "Status report, Maya," came Captain Rodriguez's voice through her communicator. The captain was currently aboard the Retribution, which served as the mobile headquarters for the Reconstruction Authority's operations in this sector. "We're ahead of schedule on the residential districts," Maya replied, pulling up holographic displays that showed construction progress across 7 different time zones. "The Centaurian Whim Gardens are taking root nicely, and the Zephyrian Crystal residence chambers are actually improving the air quality in ways we didn't anticipate. Any problems? We've got 3 different species who all need different atmospheric conditions in their homes, but want to work together in the manufacturing plants. The Altarian Council is still arguing about whether to accept the human-designed medical facilities or wait for traditional healers from their homeworld, and we've got about 50 families who want to return to planets that don't exist anymore." The last point was the hardest one to address. During their 3-millennium reign, the Dominion had strip-mined entire worlds down to their planetary cores, leaving behind nothing but lifeless rocks floating in space. Entire species had lost their homeworlds forever, and no amount of advanced human technology could bring back a dead planet. What about the integration programs? Maya activated another display, this one showing social integration metrics across the growing settlements. Better than expected, actually. When people work together to build something new, old prejudices tend to break down quickly. The children especially, they're creating mixed-species friend groups that would have been impossible under the Dominion. She paused at a window showing the central plaza of New Haven, the largest settlement on the moon's surface. Below she could see Zephyrian children playing games with young Altarians while their parents worked together on construction projects. Human teachers ran integration classes where different species learned each other's languages and customs. "There's something else, Captain," Maya continued. "The former Dominion personnel who volunteered for the reconstruction programs, They're actually some of our most effective workers. How so? They understand the old systems better than anyone. Former Supervisor Gektor has been invaluable in helping us dismantle the toxic waste processing plants safely. Admiral Vextar's strategic experience is helping us plan infrastructure that can support population growth over the next century. The rehabilitation programs for former Dominion officials had been controversial. Many liberation survivors wanted nothing to do with their former oppressors. But the practical reality was that rebuilding 47 star systems required every available pair of hands, and the former administrators possessed technical knowledge that would take decades to replace. Speaking of Vextar, how is he adjusting to his work release program? Maya pulled up a personnel file showing the former admiral's current assignment. He's leading a team that's dismantling the old command and control networks. Ironically, his knowledge of Dominion military systems is exactly what we need to make sure they can never be reactivated. And personally, he spends most of his free time in the memorial gardens, talking to survivors. I think he's trying to understand the individuals behind the statistics he used to manage. The memorial gardens were one of Maya's proudest achievements. Instead of simply erasing the Dominion installations, they had transformed the old administrative complex into a remembrance space where the names of every being who had died under Dominion rule were inscribed in their native languages. The gardens themselves incorporated plants from dozens of homeworlds, creating a living symbol of diversity and renewal. Her communicator chimed with an incoming transmission from the surface. Maya, this is Dr. Chen at the Integration Center. We need to discuss the Catharian situation. On my way down, Maya took the express transport to the surface, a journey that still amazed her every time she made it. The transport itself was a collaboration between human engineering and Centaurian artistic design, resulting in a vehicle that was both functional and beautiful. During the descent, she could see the sprawling construction projects that were transforming the moon into something unprecedented in galactic history. A truly multi-species society. The Integration Center occupied what had once been the Dominion's primary indoctrination facility, where captured beings were processed and assigned work details. Now it served as a cultural exchange hub where different species could learn about each other's traditions, languages, and ways of life. Dr. Chen met her at the entrance, looking tired but pleased. Maya, we've got good news and complicated news about the Catharian refugees. The Catharians were one of the more challenging cases the Reconstruction Authority faced. Aquatic species, they required specialized habitats and had been enslaved on water processing worlds throughout Dominion space. When those worlds were liberated, the Catharians faced a unique problem. Their home world had been completely drained of water and converted to a mining operation. Good news first, Maya said. The terraforming team thinks they can restore Catharia Prime. It'll take about 50 years and require relocating the mining operations to asteroid belts, but it's possible. Maya felt a surge of hope. Restoring dead worlds had been one of humanity's major technological developments during their centuries of preparation. It was expensive and time-consuming, but possible. And the complicated news? 3 generations of Catharians have never seen their homeworld. Many of them want to stay here and help build the new society rather than return to a planet they've never known. Maya nodded. This was becoming a common theme across the reconstruction efforts. Many freed beings had no connection to their ancestral homes and preferred to build something new rather than trying to recreate something they'd never experienced. What are their specific requests? They want to build aquatic habitats here on Zarian 7, but integrated with the surface cities rather than isolated underwater colonies. They've been working with the Altarian architects on designs that would create underwater districts connected to the surface by transparent tunnels. That's actually brilliant. It would create even more opportunities for interspecies cooperation. Exactly. But it also means committing to Zarian 7 as a permanent multi-species world rather than a temporary refugee camp. Maya looked around the Integration Center watching beings from dozens of species working together on art projects, language classes, and technical training programs. The energy was infectious. These weren't people waiting for their lives to begin. They were people actively building the future they wanted to live in. Dr. DX Preston. Chen, I think we've already committed to that, whether we plan to or not. Her communicator chirped again. Maya, this is Admiral Torres aboard the New Geneva. We need you in the council chamber immediately. We've got a situation developing. The council chamber was located on the main orbital platform in what had been designed as a temporary meeting space but was rapidly becoming the de facto capital of the new Galactic Confederation. Representatives from 47 systems met here regularly to coordinate reconstruction efforts and establish the legal framework for their emerging society. When Maya arrived, she found the chamber buzzing with activity. Admiral Torres, a stern woman who had replaced Rodriguez as the senior military officer in the sector, stood at the central podium reviewing data streams from across known space. Maya, thank you for coming. We've received a communication from the Outer Rim territories. Apparently, word of the Dominion's fall has reached some very interesting parties. Taurus activated the main display, showing a star chart that extended far beyond the former Dominion boundaries. Several systems were highlighted in yellow, regions that had never been under Dominion control. The hegemony of Zertha has sent an envoy requesting formal talks. They control 12 systems in the galactic south and have apparently been watching our reconstruction efforts with great interest. Maya felt a chill run down her spine. Are they another hostile empire? That's what we're trying to determine. According to the intelligence we're gathering, the hegemony operates differently from the Dominion. They're a confederation of species that banded together for mutual protection, but their internal policies toward individual rights are questionable. Ambassador Tavara of the Altarian Coalition spoke up from her seat in the chamber. My people have had limited contact with hegemony traders over the centuries. They're not as overtly brutal as the Dominion was, but they do practice a form of caste-based society that restricts the rights of lesser species. What do they want? Maya asked. Torres pulled up the actual communication that had been received. The face that appeared on screen was unlike any species Maya had encountered. Roughly humanoid, but with scaled skin and eyes that seemed to shift color as they spoke. Greetings to the beings who conquered the Galactic Dominion, the creature said in heavily accented Galactic Standard. I am Diplomat Sekran of the Hegemony of Zertha. We have observed your military capabilities with great respect and wish to discuss matters of mutual benefit. The message continued. We are aware that your reconstruction efforts require substantial resources and technical expertise. The hegemony possesses both, as well as access to materials and technologies unknown to this region of the galaxy. We propose a meeting to discuss potential cooperation. Torres paused the message. The question is whether this is a genuine offer of cooperation or an attempt to assess our capabilities for a future conflict. What does Earth Command think? Maya asked. Earth Command is concerned. Our intelligence suggests the hegemony has military capabilities that rival our own, but their territory is too far away for us to effectively project power. If they decide we're a threat, we could be looking at another large-scale conflict just as we're trying to rebuild from the last one. Maya studied the star charts, thinking about the millions of freed beings who were just beginning to experience real freedom for the first time in their lives. Can we afford another war? We can't afford not to consider the possibility, Torres replied. But there's another factor to consider. Some of the species in hegemony space might be suffering under oppression similar to what we found in the Dominion. If that's the case, we may have a moral obligation to act. The debate that followed illustrated the complexity of humanity's new position in the galaxy. Their military capabilities gave them the power to enforce justice, but their commitment to self-determination meant they couldn't simply impose their will on other societies without invitation. Representative Kolfara of the Zephyrian Assembly raised a crystalline arm to speak. Perhaps the question is not whether to trust the hegemony, but whether to demonstrate the principles we claim to champion. If we meet with them openly and honestly, we either gain valuable allies or learn important information about potential enemies. And if it's a trap, Torres asked, then we spring it under controlled conditions rather than waiting for them to choose the time and place of confrontation. Maya found herself thinking about the reconstruction projects below. In 2 years, they had proven that different species could work together to create something better than what had come before, but they had done so under the protection of overwhelming human military superiority. What happened when they encountered equals? Admiral, what would a meeting involve? Limited diplomatic staff, but enough security to respond to treachery, full transparency about our capabilities and intentions. And if they make unreasonable demands, then we politely decline and prepare for the possibility of future conflict. The debate continued for hours, but eventually the consensus emerged. They would agree to the meeting, but under carefully controlled conditions. A diplomatic team would be assembled that included representatives from all the major species in the reconstruction effort, demonstrating the cooperative nature of their new society. As Maya prepared to return to the surface, she realized that the reconstruction effort had reached a turning point. For 2 years, they had been focused inward, healing the wounds left by the Dominion and building new institutions. Now they were being forced to engage with the broader galaxy as equals rather than liberators. The success or failure of the upcoming diplomatic mission would determine whether the new confederation could maintain its principles while defending itself against external threats. It was a test that every idealistic society eventually faced. How do you preserve your values when those values are challenged by hostile forces? Looking down at the moon's surface, where the lights of New Haven twinkled in the artificial twilight, Maya felt a surge of determination. They had already achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. Billions of beings were living free, working together, building something better. That achievement was worth defending, whatever the cost. The next phase of humanity's promise to the galaxy was about to begin. This time they would face it not as conquerors or liberators, but as partners in a confederacy of free worlds. The universe was about to discover whether human idealism could survive contact with equals who might not share those ideals. The reconstruction of the galaxy was far from complete, but the foundation had been laid. Now it was time to test whether that foundation was strong enough to support the weight of a truly free society. 5 years after the fall of the Dominion, Captain Elena Rodriguez stood on the observation deck of the IUS Harmony, watching the sunrise over New Geneva, the capital world of the Galactic Confederation of Free Worlds. The planet below bore little resemblance to the barren mining world it had been under Dominion rule. Vast cities sprawled across continents that had been restored to natural beauty, their architecture blending the aesthetic traditions of dozens of species into something entirely new. But it wasn't the transformed landscape that held her attention this morning. It was the fleet formation visible in the distance, ships bearing the insignia not just of Earth but of Centaurians, Altarians, Cephirians, and 23 other species that had joined together to create something unprecedented in galactic history, a truly multi-species military force united by common principles rather than conquest. "Captain," came the voice of her new first officer, Commander Beltar Altheon, the same Centaurian elder who had once been known only as Worker 7743 Gamma. His great-great-granddaughter served in the ship's engineering section, part of a new generation that had never known slavery and took freedom as their birthright. "The hegemony delegation has arrived at the neutral zone. Shall I signal the fleet to take formation?" Rodriguez turned from the viewport. "Signal all ships to proceed to Concord Station. And, Commander, make sure our formation demonstrates cooperation, not intimidation. We're going to negotiations, not a battle." The journey to the neutral zone took 3 days, during which Rodriguez reviewed the intelligence reports that had accumulated over the past 5 years of careful observation and diplomatic contact with the hegemony of Zertha. What they had learned painted a complex picture that defied easy categorization. The hegemony wasn't the brutal oppressor that the Dominion had been, but neither was it the free confederation that the former Dominion territories had become. Instead, it operated on a rigid caste system where species were ranked according to their perceived contributions to society. The Zerthani, as the founding species, held all major political and military positions. Below them, other species served in specialized roles determined by their natural aptitudes, a system that denied individual choice but avoided the outright slavery the Dominion had practiced. "Captain," called Lieutenant Zara Hassan, the ship's communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from Concord Station. The Hegemony delegation has been waiting for us. Put it through." The main screen flickered to life, showing the interior of Concord Station's main conference hall. The space had been carefully designed to accommodate the environmental needs of multiple species, with adjustable atmosphere, gravity, and lighting systems that could adapt to any physiological requirements. Seated at the central table was Diplomat Sikaran, the same scaled being whose message had initiated this process 5 years earlier. But Rodriguez was more interested in the beings seated around him, representatives of at least 6 different species, all wearing the blue and silver insignia of the hegemony, but with subtle variations that suggested different ranks or positions within their hierarchy. "Captain Rodriguez," Sekran said, rising from his seat with a fluid motion that spoke of aquatic origins, "it is an honor to meet the legendary liberator of the Dominion territories face to face." "Diplomat Sekran," Rodriguez replied, keeping her voice neutral. "I appreciate the courtesy, but I should clarify that I was merely one officer among many in a Confederation-wide effort. The liberation of the Dominion was achieved by the cooperation of dozens of species working together." She gestured to the mixed species crew visible behind her on the bridge. "As you can see, our society is built on the principle that all sentient beings have equal rights and equal voices in determining their future." Sekran's color-shifting eyes tracked across the diverse faces on the screen. "Indeed. This is one of the matters we hope to discuss. The hegemony has observed your reconstruction efforts with great interest. Your technological capabilities are impressive, but even more impressive is your apparent success in maintaining order among so many different species." "Order isn't something we maintain," Rodriguez corrected gently. "It's something that emerges naturally when people are free to pursue their own interests within a framework of mutual respect and common law." "Ah, but therein lies the question that brings us together today," Sekran replied, settling back into his seat. "Can such a system truly function on a galactic scale? Can it defend itself against less idealistic neighbors? And most importantly for our purposes today, can it coexist peacefully with societies organized along different principles?" Rodriguez glanced at her diplomatic advisor, Ambassador Chen Wei, who nodded almost imperceptibly. They had anticipated this line of questioning. "Diplomat Sekran, before we proceed, I think it would be helpful to understand the hegemony's concerns more specifically. Are you worried about our expansion into your territory, our interference in your internal affairs, or something else entirely?" Sekranan exchanged glances with his fellow delegation members before responding. "Captain, the hegemony has existed for over 2 millennia. We have achieved stability and prosperity through careful organization and the recognition that different species possess different capabilities. We are concerned that your ideology of absolute equality might prove destabilizing to our region." "In what way?" "Some of our member species might be influenced by your example to demand roles and responsibilities for which they are not naturally suited. This could lead to civil unrest, economic inefficiency, and ultimately the collapse of a system that has brought peace and prosperity to 12-star systems."
Rodriguez felt a flash of anger but kept her voice level.
"Diplomat Sekran, are you suggesting that some species are inherently inferior to others?" "Not inferior," Sekran replied quickly, "but different. The Calvarians excel at detailed technical work due to their multiple arms and compound vision. The Altarians are natural healers and counselors. The Zarthani possess the strategic thinking necessary for leadership. These are not arbitrary distinctions. They are based on observable physiological and psychological differences." Commander Veltar stepped forward, his harmonious voice carrying clearly through the communication system. "Diplomat Sekran, I am a Centaurian. Under your system, what role would my species be considered naturally suited for?" Sekran consulted a tablet before responding. "Centaurians are typically assigned to artistic and cultural preservation roles. Your species excels at maintaining traditions and creating works of beauty." "I see. And would a Centaurian be permitted to serve as a military officer, a scientist, an engineer, Such assignments would be unusual, not forbidden, but discouraged in favor of roles that better utilize your natural talents. Beltar's arm tendrils moved in patterns that Rodriguez recognized as barely contained amusement. Diplomat, I spent 87 years as a slave laborer in quantum crystal mines. I then became a military officer in the Liberation Fleet, where I specialized in strategic planning and logistics coordination. Currently, I serve as first officer on one of the most advanced starships in the galaxy. According to your system, I am completely misplaced in my current role. Perhaps, Sekron admitted, but consider how much more fulfilled you might have been in a role that truly matched your species' gifts. I appreciate your concern for my fulfillment, Beltar replied, and now his harmonics carried unmistakable humor. But I find great satisfaction in choosing my own path rather than having others choose it for me. The exchange illustrated exactly what Rodriguez had hoped to demonstrate: the fundamental philosophical divide between their societies. The hegemony wasn't evil in the way the Dominion had been, but its paternalistic system denied the basic right of individuals to determine their own destinies. Diplomat Sekran Rodriguez continued, "Let me address your concerns directly. The Confederation has no interest in expanding into hegemony territory or interfering in your internal affairs. However, we also cannot compromise on the principle that all sentient beings have the right to make their own choices about their lives. But surely you can see the practical problems with such an approach." Sekran pressed. What happens when individuals make choices that are harmful to society? What happens when the pursuit of individual freedom leads to chaos and suffering? The same thing that happens in any society, Rodriguez replied. We establish laws based on common consent, institutions to enforce those laws fairly, and systems for resolving disputes peacefully. The difference is that our laws are designed to protect everyone's freedom rather than to maintain a particular social order. And when conflicts arise between different species' cultural practices, when one group's freedom interferes with another's, we negotiate, we compromise, we find solutions that respect everyone's.